In keeping with the theme of today's episode, I wanted to let you all know that I did publish 3 poems in various issues of Matt Wall's one-sheet poetry magazine, Blood Rag. They're I think it's like an issue a month, and it's literally just one sheet of paper with a bunch of poems crammed on there. They're mostly very short poems from different people. Ethan is also in a few issues, and a number of other poets whose names I knew, most poets whose names I did not know, but they're all available for free online. I will include a link to all of them, and if you're not sure which one to look at, you only have 12 pages to go through to see all of them for the year, unless I've miscounted. I think that's truly it. But they're all available online, and you can check them out if you would like. And Matt encourages the printing out and posting, selling, bartering, or smoking of copies to your heart's content. I'm Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to SLEERICKETS. Thank you all for listening. Thanks especially to those of you who have taken a moment sometime this week to recommend the show to someone you think might enjoy it. I am grateful, and with any luck, your friend will be grateful too. Your friend will be grateful too, or will stop being your friend. In which case, your friends will, on average, you will not have disrupted your friend gratitude stats. So either way, win-win. Thank you also to everybody who subscribes to The Secret Show. We've had some new subscribers recently. It's been juicy. It was just put out an episode that was at least in part about a friend-ending controversy. Friendship, not friend-ending. That's a different kind of friendship-ending controversy. I think all friends involved are still alive, thankfully. But it's been interesting, and of course you can also join the Substack chat and get in on some very nerdy conversations. Right now, we're trying to define the politics of the new criterion. I've taken a stab, possibly a bad one, but maybe you can help us out. This week, I'm speaking to Matt Wall of the I Hate Matt Wall podcast and other eponymous enterprises about what it actually means to publish a poem. Like, who cares when you publish a poem? What happens? I think like talking to him really gave me a different perspective on this whole question of like how we should think of magazines, how we should think of publications, how we should think of putting our own work out there. I don't think we end up really agreeing, but it certainly changed the way I think about it. So for all of you who gripe about Matt's opinions on things like revision or speed of composition and publication, or free verse, or the impossibility of evaluating for anyone who disagrees with them about all that, don't worry, that really doesn't come up. I mostly disagree with him about that stuff as well, but here we're really talking about something he knows a lot about, which is the sort of the nitty-gritty brass tacks of publishing poems, promoting poems, and selling poems. So I think you will want to give this one a listen. You will find Matt. I put a link to. I stopped linking to Elijah's and Matt's stuff in the show notes a while ago. I stopped linking to them because of individual episodes, and I just put a little thing at the bottom of every episode with their podcast there, so you can always find their stuff there if you like. Best friends that they are, I put them right next to each other. So this is my conversation with Matt Wall. I think you will either be very grateful to me, or you will cut me off and never speak to me again. You posted an episode recently in which you yelled at your listeners about there was a short essay by, I have it here, by Jenna Riviecchio. I think that's how you say it.
Is that how you say it?
Jenna Riviecchio. Yeah, that would be.
Wow,
that's the Italian, but then if she's American, she could pronounce it any which way.
Yeah.
So Jenna Riviecchio wrote this short piece called "On Submission Fees and the Belief That Publishers Are Pirates,"
Yeah.
and she most of it is sort of a rant at writers being ignorant and out of touch and lazy, and editors being overworked and under rewarded, and then accused of being greedy because they charge $2 submission fees. And
Yeah.
apart from her extreme hostility toward all writers, I thought I thought she basically made some reasonable points,
Yeah.
and you posted an episode largely agreeing with her and talking about some of your own experience as a publisher of magazines and chapbooks and things,
Mhm.
and the specific beef, if I recall, because you have not dealt with submission fees, but as she points out rightly, most editors are not paid. A lot of them are paying for this stuff out of pocket. A lot of them are doing
Yeah.
this as a labor of love. They're not, like in very few cases, Narrative Magazine being maybe an exception, where they actually charge $25 to submit, 5 poems or one short story or whatever, which is, and
Yeah.
then accept like a minuscule fraction of their slush.
Yeah.
So apart from them, like editors are for the most part doing this for the same reason writers are doing it, and not out of a desire to get rich off writers. The big beef you had though was
Mhm.
with people you had published.
No, not just people I have published. Well, yes and no. Okay. My biggest beef is with her idea, just to throw this out before we get any further in this.
Yeah.
Like an editor who feels like they're not being appreciated as an editor and they don't like the workload they have as an editor,
Yeah.
like fucking get a job. Like do something
Oh,
else.
well,
You
but I
know,
mean, I'm
it's
assuming
just
most
like
people doing this job, this is not a job. Most people have a job, right?
well, yeah, but I'm saying like could you imagine a writer going, God, I really, I'm a writer and everything, but I really fucking hate having to fucking write shit. Like,
Oh
man,
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah,
sucks.
yeah. So,
God,
like
like I'm
complaining
a
about, yeah, yeah,
painter.
yeah.
Like I paint houses, but I really fucking hate painting houses. It's like your job as an editor is to fucking curate fucking work to go in a fucking magazine.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
if that's too fucking taxing for you, do something else.
Yeah, I mean, the taxing. I mean, I would say more like if you really don't enjoy it at all, then you shouldn't do it because you're probably not doing it well, among other things.
Yeah.
But what you said a couple of things that struck a nerve for me, and I think
Mhm.
I have somewhat different experience, and I think fairly different like personal responses to some of these questions. But you said that you found it very frustrating when you published poets that they would post that they had something accepted on social media.
Mhm.
Oh, I got into X.
Yeah.
And which I just don't understand at all. Like I don't understand posting that. Like what am I supposed to do with that? I mean, I'm not on social media at this point, so I don't. But like
Yeah.
I don't.
Well,
To me,
it's
bizarre.
not just poems. It's like I was doing fiction zines for years before I started doing poetry zines.
Yeah.
And when people get accepted, they usually get excited that they got accepted and they're like, "Hey, I got accepted."
Sure.
But like and over the years of following all these writers and poets, they rarely ever say, "Hey, that thing I got accepted in 3 months ago is out now. Here's the
Yeah.
link. Go check it out." Even if it's free,
Right.
like you don't really see that, but you will
They're
see
not
people
promoting
saying,
the
"I got,"
magazine itself.
yeah, they're just like, "Hey, give me head. I got accepted in something,"
Right.
which
And
is
so
cool.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, as little as that post makes sense to me, I do understand that for me, the triumph of a publication like that is the acceptance, not because the publication itself doesn't matter, or rather, because the publication itself doesn't matter. Like very often, the like the ugly truth is that nobody's going to fucking read it, and so it is only it's like a philosophical victory.
Yeah, but the problem here is, though, like, if writers are pissed off that the small press is dying
Yeah.
and bitching about it, but not doing anything to help its longevity by letting people know that it even fucking exists,
Right.
like, what's the fucking point?
So yeah, and so the thing you said that just blew my mind was that you looked back through your correspondence, and you had plenty of correspondence with writers about, good things, bad things, complaints, corrections, etc. But you had maybe only on one or two occasions heard from a writer to say, "Oh, I didn't get
Yeah,
my contributor copies."
yeah,
And the thing you said specifically that just like was like a lightning bolt to me was you said you didn't understand why, like, that you were expecting to send people contributors copies so they could sell them.
yeah,
And like, which to you was just the most obvious thing in the world, and to me was inconceivable. Like, it's
yeah,
inconceivable to me that a contributor's, and I have we have shelves full of contributors copies downstairs. It's inconceivable to me that anybody could, like, the only thing I ever do with them is give them to my parents occasionally. If it's like a poem I think they might like or something, but like, there's no, like, nobody would ever.
yeah. I got a lot of heat for that one. Like, saying, like some people are like, who the fuck are you trying to tell people they need to go out and sell their fucking copies? And I'm like, well, people don't
Oh,
have to go out and sell their copies.
yeah, I
But
didn't read it like that. I didn't read it like that.
but it's like the whole idea, because the argument that came from it was like, maybe you came from a different place where that was like something you did. But like, if you're expecting me to go out and try to sell like the stuff that I'm in, like, that's asking a lot. And the mindset difference, to me, is fucking just, it boggles my mind. And again, it could be from like how, like, being raised in like the punk scene and shit.
Sure.
Like, you would go to shows, take pictures of bands, interview them, make fucking shitty little zines at fucking Kinko's all night, and then go to the next show and sell those out of your backpack while you're walking around so you have enough money to get into the next show.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah. No, you
it's
were
like
offering
this
it as like a
hustle.
commodity, right? You
Yeah.
weren't saying like, I want you to go to work for me. You were saying, oh, this is a thing you can sell so you can have money.
Yeah. And like,
Right.
I have like tabled it like zine fests and conventions and shit like that. And when people give me contributor copies of anything, I'm like, score. Now I have something else on my table. You know what I'm saying? And so, to me, anytime someone's going to give me something that I could fucking sell and make money on, because
Right.
a lot of times when you get picked up in these things, maybe you get $5, maybe you get
Oh
$10,
yeah, often there's no
you
pay.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So it's like, if they give you like 5 copies or 10 copies of something to go sell, when someone gives me 10 copies, I'm like, oh, that's $100.
Right.
Like, that's my gas bill.
Yeah,
Like, I gotta fucking,
yeah.
but that's just me.
No,
That's
no,
how
but
I,
that way of thinking is extraordinary to me, and to me, like, it clarifies the dishonesty of the whole submission process. So I think like there's just so much dishonesty on both ends of the submission process, and it made me want to like hammer out with you what it is that actually happens during submission, because it seems like to me there are all of these moments where editors and writers communicate with each other in a really bad faith way, or like with this sort
yeah,
of weird understanding that, like, oh, we both are lying. Like,
yeah,
neither of us means this. And like, what, like,
yeah.
one being when editors say, oh, if you're going to submit to our magazine, we really would like you to be familiar with it. We'd like you to read at least a few
Oh my fucking God.
of
Yeah.
it, really get to know us and what we're about and what, sort of story would fit with us. And the thought I have is always like, well, that's nice. And like, it's not that I never do that with any magazine. It's just that it's so difficult to get into magazines that if you're going to submit at a rate that will make that even remotely likely,
Mm-hmm.
you have to submit widely. And it's impossible to read all of the magazines you submit to
Exactly.
this
Dude,
closely.
I had this fucking guy, and it was an older dude, and I think it was actually a place from out here in LA. But the guy, like, I read the fucking form that they wanted whatever the submission to be like. I sent them the thing. He sends me a rejection and then says, you know what? Why don't you subscribe to our magazine? I'll give you a
Yeah.
discount.
Yep.
And then you could just get this magazine every 2 months or whenever it comes out, and then you'll know what we like. And I'm like, I was just like, what the fuck, dude?
I actually won't know because I won't have read it because I won't.
Oh my God,
right.
dude.
But I mean, but I'm also sympathetic because like as an editor, you think, well, who's fucking reading this shit?
Exactly.
Because the other thing is like when I get like, not only do I not promote an issue when I mean, not, I publish very seldom at this point, but not only do I not promote an issue, I don't usually read it. Like
Yeah.
I will read the table of contents and then I will read some of it, but it's not, it's not, I had this conversation with Shane where he feels differently about the quantity of poetry out there and his relationship to it. Personally, I feel like I've always got more than enough to read.
Yeah.
And I try to read, like, if it's not something I have to read for work or I have to read for some specific purpose, or I have like a reason to want to read, then I try to be kind of choosy. Like I will read some things because they happen to, spark my interest, but I try not to just pick up stuff where I have a very small likelihood of enjoying it. And that's the case for most.
But I think the problem here is that most literary magazines, and this was a lot of the research that I was talking to you about, most literary magazines are supported by grants and shit.
Yeah.
Like they don't have to actually try to fucking sell anything.
Right. This was the premise behind the doomed arts vouchers that Brian and I talked about.
Exactly.
The idea is like if you actually were having to compete for audience interest, then that would really change the way you thought about what you were publishing.
Totally.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, this right here, this isn't even all of them, but this is all I had on hand. This stack right here are my chapbooks.
Everything's so weird and blurry. It's like you're doing this in a pool of jello.
So these
stack of chapbooks. Okay,
these are just my chapbooks, and it's like I sell these things, and it's like no one is ever going to give a shit about your work the way you're going to give a shit about your work.
Yes.
So you need to fucking, and I got all this fucking shit out because like I didn't know what exactly we were going to be doing, but like this isn't even all of my fucking novels,
Right? Yeah. You're
it's
insanely
just like
prolific. Yeah.
You have to fucking write and put shit out, whether you're doing like small press shit or you're just doing it for yourself. Like this whole idea, like this is where a lot of like what that article said and what like conversations you and me have had boggles my fucking mind, because like when you say, oh, making money off of your art, people are like, oh, like there's like a chuckle that comes after it.
Yeah.
And it's like, when did this happen that like artists all of a sudden like it's a joke in order to like make a living as an artist? And is it just because of grants and just because of, well, there's not a lot of money in the arts, but if you do this thing and this thing, you can do this thing and be subsidized?
Yeah, I think we also divide art. I mean, we have this weird the weird thing here in this country where like just a colossal portion of the population is trying to make art all the time, and a tiny portion of them make art for money. And so part of it is a matter of being of like this weird lopsided, it's like, in conversations about the writer's strike, you hear people say like the most obvious observation in the world is like, you could never do this with actors. You could, just because there's just too many desperate actors who would do take any work they could possibly get. And the same is true for poets. So some of it is like this weird imbalance of supply and demand. And then part of it is also that we have kind of split art from what we think of as entertainment or like the, certain rarefied worlds of like collector's art. Like my thought was to say like, I want to have a contributor's copy so I can sell it. That's a very alien impulse, but to me, that's the right kind of impulse. Like that's an honest, like if that is a live possibility, then that's a meaningful relationship to publication. Whereas for me, I mean, I have a deeply cynical attitude toward my own publication. I talked to you a little bit about this on your show, but like I submit in two kinds of ways to magazines. One, people solicit. It doesn't happen very often, but somebody asks for work. Of course, I always send work if somebody asks.
Yeah.
2, I submit to places where I think there is a reasonable chance that somebody selecting for Best American Poetry, Poetry Daily, Verse Daily, American Life and Poetry, one of these places will be reading. Because I, when I have had things in those anthologies, which you can call them anthologies, a publication, a website, whatever, or newspaper, American Life and Poetry, they put it in a gajillion newspapers across the country. When I have had things selected from magazines for those, then people have actually read them.
Yeah.
But when I publish in a magazine, it is an absolute crapshoot as to who will like. So I'm really just aiming. I'm not even aiming for the magazine itself. I'm aiming for the person who might be looking for one of these groups, and it's a prominent enough magazine that he might stumble across it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, like I was thinking about this whole, because like you were complaining that people you publish don't promote the magazine when it actually comes out, and my thought is very much two-sided. Like on the one hand, I totally feel your frustration as somebody who, I'm not a I'm an associate editor, right? Basically, I'm like, I help out with a magazine. It's not my baby. I don't have the same relationship to it, but I definitely know the editor's frustration. Like, fucking promote this shit. We would like people to read the magazine.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I try to think cynically about myself as an audience when it comes to this sort of stuff. And like there is really just like one kind of, there are two cases in which I would, when I was on Facebook or whatever, there's really just two cases where I would like click on a poem that somebody promoted on one of these social media sites.
Yeah.
One is somebody I respect, am recommending a poem by somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Right. If Jonathan said, "Oh, you should read this poem," then I'll say, "Oh, okay, all right. Like, I'll take a look at it." Right.
But if Jonathan said, "Read my poem," you'd be like, eh.
Well. So then but I was gonna say, then the other case is if it's somebody I already would be reading the poetry of anyway, and all I'm learning is like, oh, there's a poem I can read now.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's, when Joshua Megan has a new poem out, it's not that he's saying like, let me pitch you on this poem. It's like, oh, you have a poem to read.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't hear about it yet, and so now I'm excited to read it. So like, if it was either a friend or like a poet I admired, or some combination of the two, somebody I would have been reading their work anyway, and this is just like a notification that this exists now.
Yeah.
That's a time when I would also go look at it. Somebody saying, hey, you've never particularly heard of me, or you only know me vaguely, or I'm an acquaintance, and I'm in the new issue of blah, blah, blah. Again, for me, it's just like dollars to donuts. Like odds are that's going to be a piece of shit, or it's going to be fine. It's going to be like a totally mediocre, fine, whatever. Well,
that just sounds like you're keeping bad company.
No, I'm talking about it's odds. Yeah. It's odds, man. It's the odds. It's like it's the odds on like. There's just too much shitty poetry.
Let me explain something though. And like, I'm not trying to like say this in a shitty way.
No, please. Yeah.
But like I have certain tastes. You have certain tastes.
Yeah.
The problem with the poetry fucking world is that they're not trying to do any kind of mass appeal. So your argument is, I'm a cynical fucking reader. Someone's going to post something. It's going to be shit. Okay. But there are people out there who don't really write and submit, and who just fucking read poetry. Yeah. That if someone were to say, hey, read this, like you might like it, they'd go, oh, I'll read this. I might like it. I'm highly suggestible.
Well, yeah, but then the 100th time, the reason I take a pause before I read something like that is not because I have some fundamental cynicism. It's because I've clicked through a gajillion times before. Yeah. And so even if you are a non-writing poetry enthusiast, maybe the first 80 times some random person says, oh, read my poem, it's in this magazine, you'll click through, but at some point you'll realize these are almost always terrible, and you'll start to be choosy. It's not that you don't ever, it's just that you get choosier. And so I mean, the same is true for like there's a thing you do that's really nice that a few other podcasts I listen to do, It's very nice. I totally get it. And like I subscribe, like I get it. But like the thing you do is like if somebody supports your podcast, then you take a moment to read that person's name.
Yeah.
Right. As a thank you. And the reason I don't do that, and maybe my subscribers would like me to, but the reason I don't is that when I'm listening to a podcast that does that, I hit skip.
Yeah.
Like I do, like go ahead 30 seconds. Go ahead. Like let me get to the end of this because I don't want to listen to it. And so if I would be hitting skip, I assume other people would, and so I don't want to put that out. It's similarly like I, when I published poems in the past, I would say like, oh, I have a new piece here and make it available because I figured, that is the sort of thing where if it's somebody I know, then if somebody I know or I know his work, then I would be glad to be notified of this. But I also assume other people are going to be just as cynical as I am about what they click on and what they don't. And so it makes me think like we need to rethink this whole question of what is actually happening when we publish. Because there's so much, like we get copies of magazines there's so many magazines where like the submission fee doubles as a subscription. It's like, I didn't want to subscribe to your shitty magazine. I just wanted you to publish it, my poem, because I thought somebody might read it. So I just think like there's so much weird, bad faith happening that I don't know. It made me want to like wipe it out and start over from scratch.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that, I don't even know. There's so many things here. But like, first off, if we're talking from a publisher side, the publishers need to know that at the beginning of the year, they need to sit down and go, how do we double our readership? If they're not having that conversation, they're doing it wrong and they need to be fucking fired.
Yeah.
If they're not seriously going, how do we do this? How do we make this grow?
Yep.
They're dead. If you're not growing, you're fucking dead. That's it. You have your readers, and those are the people who are going to read your shit.
Sounds awfully capitalist of you, I gotta say.
It is very capitalist of me because that's how it works. You need to, especially now with how fast the people who like me, like I'm fast, I'm growing like a fucking nasty rash. Yeah. Okay. And if you aren't going to do that as well, you are going to get overtaken. It's how it is. I would love everything to be happy and nice, but you've proven a really big point, which is like writers are the worst fans anyone can ever have because writers don't fucking read other people's shit. Like how many of your friends, I know, but how many of your friends like have you bought their books? Like, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here.
If I know you personally, I buy your book. And I usually, and I try to make a point of writing a note to you. Like if I read any poetry book I read, with very few exceptions, I will write a note to the author, whether I know him or not.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I seriously, like
and
most writers do not do that.
You publish a book every fucking month. And so I may have to, I don't know. We got like, hold on,
No, I get that.
Like I own half of Amit's books. Like fucking come on, man. Like it's too many.
No, but seriously, a lot of writers like listen to writing podcasts and they follow writers who are doing well to learn from them, not to read their shit, not to be a fan.
Yeah.
It's that whole, like we were talking about Malcolm.
But that's also the reason I don't promote my own shit on my podcast, because I assume like people would have the same feeling I have, which is like, oh, skip.
But you should, because like, for instance, you said that you're an assistant editor at this magazine 3 times tonight, and you haven't said the name of the magazine.
Oh, it's because I don't know
if you're allowed to.
I don't know if they want to be associated with me. Like that's the honest answer. I don't like. I think I think it's like it's helpful to have this sort of loose, vague relationship where like you can look it up and find it if you want to know, but like they don't necessarily want me boosting them on my podcast.
That's fucking awesome. No, but I get you. But like,
but you so you made me reconsider this thing, right? Which is like I'm not on Facebook or Twitter, but I do this podcast, and so I thought, all right, well, from my perspective, the things that I was always glad to hear about was when it was a writer I already knew that I already would want to, either personally or I knew the work and it was somebody I would want to read anyway. When that person has a new piece out, That's something I want to read.
Yeah.
So then this thought, and I've been chewing this over, and I don't know where I come down yet, is, well, then is there a meaningful way, either on the podcast or in the show notes or somewhere, or even just through the Substack thing, to say, here's some stuff that people affiliated with the podcast are publishing lately. Like, here's some stuff to go look up. But the thing is, like, what I don't want to do is create a garbage dump of links, or create just like stuff for people to skip. So I want to like find a way to also to be choosy, because I also know like there are people who publish like, again, like a whole lot, and so I just like I know that there are different ways it could very quickly become, like, there's a whole section on erratosphere, which is like where there's a whole thread, or a whole like room of threads, I don't even know how it's organized, but where like all it is people can post if they've published stuff, and that's fine. But like, I know as an occasional lurker on erratosphere, the number of times I have clicked on that thread, 0.
Yeah.
And I just suspect, like, again,
well,
I may be
totally
a worse
like
person
that.
than everyone else, but I assume most people are kind of crummy like me.
No, like when I was trying to see if Facebook was viable for any kind of anything, I joined a bunch of poetry groups, and some of these groups had thousands and thousands of people in it. And you go in there and people are posting every day, and it's like, hey, this is my poem that got published, blah, 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 blah. This is my poem that I just wrote right now. Look at this poem, and all this other shit. I put a posting on all of those things saying, I'm looking for submissions, send this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Send it to me. I didn't get a single one from Facebook.
No one's reading it.
No one reads anything. They go on, click post, and get the fuck out of there. Nobody gives a shit.
And that's how people are treating magazines too. Like, everybody's submitting to these magazines. Like the only thing I can trust is that they will have read, like, because everybody reads the table of contents, and that's it. And so I can't even trust that the other people in the table of contents with me will have read it, because I'm not reading most cases, I'm not reading their work on there.
All of these things, these websites, Facebook, what you're talking about, it's because all of these poetry places and poetry magazines are like trying to sell themselves to poets. That's the problem. The poets are looking to get their shit out there. When you pick up a book, you look at the table of contents, that's about it. They need to start focusing their attention on people who are not writing poetry. I know that sounds fucking foreign and weird and shit, but that's how you have to do it.
I mean, even like when I wrote reviews, and I got tired of it for a few reasons, one of which was that I felt like I had to walk a kind of a tightrope of like technical honesty that just got exhausting. But when I wrote a review of a book, or wrote something like a piece of criticism about poetry, those pieces got read a lot more reliably, even by the poets that I knew, than poems. And so I'm totally with you. Like publications need to appeal to a mass audience, need to appeal to an audience beyond poets themselves, but also like at least appeal to poets. Like, at least, like, they can't even make like a magazine that poets want to read. Like, at least do that if you can't.
But the poets like the drama posts, like, hey, guess what? Poetry's dead this year, and here's why. Like, every poet and their mom's gonna fucking read that one. But like, if you have like a article that's like, here's a good book of poetry, people like skip it, right?
Right. No, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not just that people are only appealing to poets; they're not even appealing to poets.
But that's the whole thing, because writers are your worst fans.
Yes,
that's like goes back to the first point. Like, if your whole focus is to try to get poets to buy your shit, you're dead. Like, that's a non-starter.
All right. So poets are an unusually shitty audience, is what you're saying.
Well, no, any writers, like
any writers are an unusually shitty audience. That's probably.
Well, it's just like, I don't know how many painters buy tons of paintings. They don't. They paint paintings and fucking stack them all over their fucking house.
Well, what they do is they trade. with other painters, but they
Okay.
but they don't pay money, right? Yeah, there's no money involved. They just trade work. Yeah, which is not, and you can't do that with poems because poems aren't objects, and that's really what I meant when I said poems are free.
Yeah.
Like like when I spent a lot of time around artists in college, part of what was sort of painful was like they would trade work because like that's a fucking print, and like even if it's one of 15, that's a real physical object.
Totally.
What can I trade for that? Some words that's
Yeah.
infinitely reproducible. So yeah, like if I had a physical copy, like if I had a book or I made a thing, but that's what I meant when I said poems are free. Like the poem itself is not an object; it's just information.
Well, it is because, like what you were saying, like if that's one of 15, all my chapbooks are numbered, all my paperbacks are numbered.
Oh yeah, you make them into prints, right?
Yeah,
but the
then,
poem itself, like that's a secondary art after the work of actually writing.
Well, I mean, if
like bookmaking is its own art in addition to writing.
Yeah,
right. And so the
bookmaking, but you have to have something to
thing.
put in the book.
Totally, but it's not the writer who can trade his work for photographs or paintings. It's the bookmaker.
Oh, I do.
No, it's the bookmaker who can trade his work. And so when you do that, I'm saying you're doing that as a bookmaker.
I'm saying
you trade the raw information of poems.
I've traded words for stuff, bro. Just the raw fucking words, no copy.
What was the context? Because I can imagine some context, but I want to hear what this was.
Nudes.
Nude words?
No, pictures.
Yeah, that okay. Yeah, no, right. No, it's not that I don't believe nudes have that. Like, I believe I definitely believe there's a thing of value that isn't the words. I'm just like, what was the nature of the words you were trading?
Let me ask you this. So
or is this just like somebody wanted to give you nudes and this was like a kinky game you were playing? Just like, what are we talking about? Like, I don't need to hear that. Like, I traded my safe word for having somebody stop beating me with
well, no, but like say you email a magazine a poem of yours and they're gonna like put it on their website or whatever, and then they give you $5. Does that not happen?
Oh yeah. I mean, it happens. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes. No, people do. Yeah, that's true. I just think like it's funny. Like you can occasionally sell words to like publishers. The person you can't sell them to is to an artist. Like to other artists, it's like like, oh no, give me a print. Give me
that's where we're back to the same thing that artists as your fan base is you're fucked.
Yeah. So then the thing I was trying to think about is like, okay, how would I go about approaching my own my own publication, my own work, and my own promotion of it? How would I go about doing this in a good faith way that like using a Kantian principle that like I would as a stranger give a shit if I were to encounter this?
Don't do social media. You're doing fine with the podcast and Substack and everything like that. I would start a mailing list where you can just like once a month or once a week or however often you want to do it, let people know that you have, if you sign up for this mailing list, I will send you one poem a month or something like that. If you were to start, because you could do it on Substack, I thought. Like,
definitely. Like I mean, that's what it's actually meant. It's not really meant for podcasts.
Yeah. So like that whole thing, like, because honestly, the click-through rate you get from normal social media is garbage.
Oh yeah. Get people to sign up to say, yes, I would like to opt in to have you send me poems.
Yeah. Mailing lists are great because those people want to know your shit and they have to take steps to do it. And then you have their email address. And whenever you're doing something or you're selling something or anything like that, you could send them something and they're usually wanting to hear that. They want that. That's why they signed up in the first place.
Okay. So then, all right. So then, I mean, there are a few complications. One is, I assume to whatever degree to which people come and listen to this podcast, they're not coming to it for my poetry because they don't hear my poetry on it. So that's a different set of interests than the people subscribing.
Yeah, but in the notes, in the show notes, you can say, hey, and if you're interested in my poetry, click this link and sign up for my mailing list and blah, 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 blah.
All right. So then is the problem, I mean, and this is the same problem that journalists run into who've had clashes with, the legacy media outfits. The is the problem that we then just things get fragmented to a crazy degree where you're having to subscribe to or sign up for every individual writer or every individual artist you're interested in, which becomes unsustainable, right?
I don't know if that becomes unsustainable because I think that's where society is.
Well, it becomes unsustainable if anybody's paying for it. Right.
But it's the same thing with streaming services. Like people
no, it's not, because streaming
cable.
services are not just one person's work. That's the question. The question is bundling. Like if you subscribe to whatever at the Atlantic and you have several different people still writing there. I think I'm trying to think of the various people who've gotten kicked off the Atlantic or quit for one reason or other or moved on. Ta-Nehisi Coates was there. I think Matthew Iglesias was there for a while.
That Platzer dude.
Brian Platzer was there. Andrew Sullivan was there. Yeah. Various other Matt Taibbi was at Rolling Stone. But like, if you subscribe to a magazine and you get like regular writing from all of these different people, Jen Senior, good old Jen, or is she at New York? I can't remember. But like, if you subscribe to one magazine and get work from all these people, or they all split off and start their own subscription service, and suddenly you're subscribing to 5 subscription services to get to hear from all those people. Like that's not the whole thing. We're in this transitional phase. You can't do that. You can't keep building on that. Like that can't keep going.
You can. It is.
People can't afford it. Like it doesn't. It's not gonna. It's like you're subscribing to like 10 different subscription fees to get a fraction of what you would get from a streaming service or from a legacy publication, right?
Well, I mean, then what's the difference between that and The Secret Show?
Oh, there's not. No, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what The Secret Show is. But I'm saying like that model for all artists, for all things.
But I mean, if you look at like how many active users are on Patreon, how many active users are on Substack, if you check all this shit out, I mean, YouTube memberships. Like I have people who do YouTube memberships.
No, I know.
You know, and it's like people who are fans of your shit are going to fucking do that. Like I've been doing The Secret Show ever since I heard about it.
Right. But they're like, let me put it this way. Like there are models for us to be able to take in work from lots of different people while pay. Like the reason you pay for a streaming service or for a magazine is to bundle the costs of all of those people together so it's not as onerous. Because instead of subscribing to 50 different Substacks, you subscribe to one magazine that contains 50 articles in, right? Like that's the basic idea. And the price of that is much lower than the price of 50 Substack subscriptions.
But you're like negating the fact that people might actually be a huge fan of yours and want to support you.
That's great. I mean, I would love to. The thing is, like, I would love to hear from listeners about this because, again, I think there's a lot of bad faith. There's also a lot of bad faith among artists who say things like, "Oh, this is great, you know, hooray for you, yeah, boost. This is, you know." Like mutual sharing and promoting. And I know like people, I don't want to name names, but like, I know there's like, I've heard plenty of complaints from people saying like, oh, I promoted this person's work, but then when I had a thing, he didn't promote my work. And
exactly.
I think, again, like it's not that I don't feel that, I don't understand that. It's just that like that suggests that there's just a lot of dishonesty. Yeah. And so I would love to hear from people about like, what is an actual way they would read poetry? What is an actually meaningful way to make your work available? To like, it would be great not to be doing all of this with so many layers of ulterior motives to it. Like I would love not to be submitting to magazines I don't read to get published alongside other people in an issue I won't even read all the way, just for the chance of some guy down the road who might, for whom this might be a prominent enough publication that he might select it for something where like maybe a few more people would read it.
Well, do you know who like those I would love to
be doing?
Do you know who those people are that you want to read the magazine?
No, I know which publications they work for.
Oh, okay.
What I'm saying is these are like aggregator web, like where they choose, you know, supposedly the best of, or at least things they like out of.
Okay.
Well, and so it's not, like I mean, David Lehman's one of them, but that's a whole different question, you know.
Okay, well, you need to go to David Lehman's
David
house,
Lehman.
start
Yeah.
digging through his trash,
Why
and
are
then
you
go,
not
oh, wait,
subscribed at the
excuse me.
top level to the secret show? Yeah, let's get you on this program.
The one thing
I've already insulted
is
so many people he's been affiliated with.
the one thing I was going to say is like I did another one where I was talking about, there was this article, I think it was on Substack too, but it was about publishers should say how much stuff they take that's unsolicited versus solicited,
Yes.
and like be upfront with that. But I also think, and we could talk about that too, but I also think publications should share their circulation. Like that should be
Oh
common
yeah.
fucking
Oh totally,
knowledge,
totally. Yeah.
you know, especially if you're asking for money. So where do you stand on that?
Yes. I mean, I think that seems great. I mean, I wish there were a lot more transparency across the board. I also understand, like, I understand why some editors would not want to do that, right? For the same reason that,
Because their
um,
ass is going to be on the line.
like Patreon. I'm not on Patreon, but like they have a feature. I don't know if you're aware of this, but like they have a feature where you pay them a higher percentage of your patrons' donations in
Mhm.
order to conceal the number of patrons you have from the public.
I don't know if that's still how that works, because I think I just got a thing saying that you could take that off if you want.
Great, which is fine, but like
Yeah.
that was the way the feature worked. It wasn't that you
Yeah.
paid them more in order to display. It
Oh
was
yeah,
that you
yeah,
paid more in order to conceal, because, I mean, for the same reason that a lot of magazines aren't going to want to share their circulation, right?
well
Because it's
the,
probably appallingly small in many cases.
well, the thing with Patreon is that I don't think people go on Patreon to go, I wonder who I could support today. Let me
No, 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 no,
just
no. Yeah,
browse.
right. I
It's
mean, that's
like
not how I do. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
get sent to Patreon from
Right.
people,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
know. And so with magazines, I think it's maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but I think it's a little bit different, because with the magazines, it's like, if I'm going to submit to you, I need to know if me giving you $25 is worth me being in 50 magazines.
Don't give $25 to submit. Just to start,
Yeah,
just like
just don't do
don't do
it.
that, because that means you're submitting to narrative, and you should not submit to narrative.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
don't
yeah.
do that. I mean, the other thing though is, of course, like the reason that they do weird shit, like, oh, you subscribed and that doubles as a you'll be sure you submitted and that doubles as a subscription because you paid the $3 fee. The reason, of course, they do that is because then their subscription numbers go up.
Yeah.
So then, like, everybody who's ever submitted a poem is a subscriber, and then then their circulation numbers go up to whomever they do share that information with.
Yeah.
You mentioned you'd been doing some research, much of it maybe hitting dead ends because you were trying to get information about how magazines and presses actually do, like, what kind of numbers they're looking at in terms of distribution, in terms of circulation, in terms of editions, what's actually
Yeah.
happening behind the mystique of publishing a book or publishing a magazine. And it sounds like you were
Yeah.
not able to get many straight answers on that.
No, because like I was hitting up like the big publishing companies too, like
Yeah.
trying to find out like what their numbers are, like when they do like their like stockholder shit and all that other
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
stuff. And it's still not bracketed to where like this is exactly what poetry did for us this quarter.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so that like pissed me off a little bit, because I felt like that would be at least the like the bar, I guess, because they are trying.
Yes.
And then going to small
They are, yeah,
presses,
they're serious businesses trying to do a real thing.
exactly. Yeah. So not being able to find the information that I actually was looking for,
Yeah.
I started looking at small presses and magazines and stuff like that. And so many of them are not for profit. They're not like they're not looking to sell more copies in order to build their brand or anything like that. So finding this information, I just kept kind of coming up short. So the only thing that has worked for me really is doing everything more grassroots anyway. So I'm like, okay, well, so instead of trying to like figure out how to make a wheel, I'm just going to fucking do the thing that I kind of already know how to do, and just kind of hope that it works in a bigger scale.
because you're talking about, you already put out chapbooks and a broadsheet, and then do you publish your own full collections as well?
Yeah, I put out my paperbacks, but usually how that works out is I wait until my chapbooks go out of print, and
Okay.
then I'll take a bunch of those that are out of print and then put them into a paperback, like
Okay.
do a bind up of that.
All right.
This last one I did all new stuff, and that was kind of risky, but yeah. So that's
Because you had not already established
I
interest
haven't
in the
or
specific portions of it, or
not an interest in specific portions of it, but an interest in the fact that it's not there anymore.
like if you missed out on this chapbook, now you can get it
Exactly.
in the it's sort of like when comic books finish a volume and they get collected
Exactly.
into a graphic novel or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this was just new from the jump.
Yeah.
So you have been talking some about trying to start a press in a more, is it a more formal sense, or is it just a bigger
Hmm.
scale, or what is it that you're trying or
Um,
planning? Or
what I'm aiming for is I do the blood rag, which is just the one sheet, like the broadsheet deal. And then I'm going to be next month the bloodshed review, like it's more of a magazine with multiple
okay.
people in it,
And
highlighting
blood
them,
rag has multiple people. It's sort of individual, like it's like
just like one poem.
10 short poems or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so this is going to be focusing on like anywhere from 3 to 5 poets per issue,
Okay.
and kind of
Longer selections. Yeah.
longer selections and kind of highlighting them.
Okay.
And then the featured person in that is going to have like a chapbook in the middle of the magazine that can pull out.
Okay.
And how I want to do this is like people start in the blood rag, start into the non-feature parts, and then go to the non-feature parts of Bloodshed Review, then
Yeah.
move to the chapbook. If all these things work, then I'll do a chapbook of theirs. And if the
Right.
chapbooks work, then I will do print versions of their books.
And to be clear, by work, you mean sell.
Yes and no, because
Okay.
there are a couple poets who I have kind of discovered through all this
Sure.
that I fucking really, really believe in.
Yeah.
And that I think that if pushed the right way, they will be able to do what they need to do.
But I just want to be as specific and clear as possible. When you say do what they need to do you mean
Oh,
make
I
the
mean,
best
like
work they can make, or do you
make the
mean
best work and that I can actually sell it as someone who's
right?
hustling for them.
Because part of what you have in mind when you talk about the quality of a poem or of a poet is the kind of thing people like when they're not trying to think about being smart for the sake of reading poetry, like, or reading poetry for the sake of being smart, like actual unpretentious, unprepared literary enjoyment, not in the context of mutual praise, but just an ordinary person picking something up and saying, "Oh, maybe this will be interesting to read." Like
I think both.
you want both the pretentious and the unpretentious dollars. You're willing to
Yeah.
accept. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am
All
an
right.
equal opportunity dollar taker.
Yeah. But you are. This is that you're looking to build a business.
Yeah.
This is not
And
a nonprofit.
no. And not only build a business, but build a business that pays everybody. Being able to take care of the writers that I'm putting out in a way that is more than what they would get going somewhere else. You know what I'm saying?
Which is not that's not a high bar to reach, and like because they're not
Oh,
getting
no, it's
much
not
of
a high
anything.
bar at
Yeah,
all. No.
they're mostly paid pretty fucking shittily, even by at this point, even by the big
Yeah,
publishers.
that
Pretty
was
expensive.
something that shocked me kind of to my core when I was seeing like what actual monies are being paid out for stuff. It's
Yeah.
shocking.
So the obvious challenge or question that I think a lot of people are going to have is,
Mhm.
where is your market? Who is actually buying all this stuff?
Well, a lot of it is coming out of like my own like fan base.
Okay.
And then depending on how do I say this without just sounding like, well, the marketing will tell me. But
Right.
like
Right.
going to places that aren't the places that the poetry magazines are being sold at. You know, like
Okay.
going to the place. Like I'm not sitting here going, oh,
You're not looking at universities.
no.
You're looking at like clubs that have rock shows.
Anything like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like different types of bookstores, coffee
Sure.
shops, anywhere where. And then here's like another thing. Like do you know what like the gift market is?
I
Like,
mean, I can
okay, let's
guess.
say
Yeah.
like somebody writes a book and it's mainly about dogs. Like I will try to get the book
Oh.
in
Right.
shops that sell stuff
Yeah.
for dogs.
This is like when a pop singer does a Christmas album.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, you're giving them something that is kind of like a weird impulse buy, but you
Okay.
have enough room in that place to have a face out book instead of
Right.
it just being like spying out in a sea of other books.
Yeah. I get it. So then you don't, so you're not too precious about, like, you want people to be excited to read this stuff, but you also don't mind selling it to aunts who thought it had a cute cover and want to give their niece something for dog Christmas.
Sure, but at the same time, I want cult like fans.
Okay. But
You
that's
know,
not,
like
that's separate from the gift market thing, right?
it's not because, like,
Okay.
have you ever been in a shop that had anything for a dog? Like,
Had anything for a dog? Like, I've
sure.
been in shops, like kitschy shops that have little theme sections or like, yeah, I mean, I've been,
Okay,
yeah,
so you've been into one of these places. Like,
sure.
could you imagine like going in there and seeing a book of poetry that you thought was really good? Let's just like say it like this.
Never.
Okay, but let's say
Oh, you want me
like
to imagine? You weren't
yeah,
asking me. You were asking me to imagine. I see.
exactly. So
Yeah.
you can go in and buy something and end up being like have that be like a great find
Oh,
and
yeah.
you become
Definitely.
like a lifelong
Totally.
fan.
Yeah. I've definitely, well,
Yeah.
like, and that is true. Like, I have had, like family members buy me something because because of some theme, but then it accidentally turned out to be good.
Yeah.
So that's true. Okay. So it's sort of like you are aiming to have kind of like a barbed hook there where like,
Yeah.
oh, you bought it for some, like your aunt bought it for some silly reason, but then if you actually open it, you will realize that it's something good.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, okay, all right, I mean,
And it doesn't even have to be your aunt. Like you can stumble upon it. Like I can
sure.
stumble upon it,
But
you know?
I'm trying to like, I'm like parsing this gift market thing, like,
Like I have this rich aunt
yeah,
that keeps going into random shops and
not
buying me
rich,
stuff.
but like,
Just fucking
I
with
think
you.
like that's
Yeah.
like, I gave a whole lecture about this at Wham City back in Baltimore, that like there is this thing where, which is totally understandable, like you can only know so many people so well, and like even the
Mhm.
friends you have, you start to type them in your mind,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, you know what, Matt loves bow ties. I saw him wearing a bow tie a few times. Let's get, oh, this
Oh
is a
yeah.
bow tie themed coffee mug. Like, let's get him this. Do you think like,
There you go.
right? I mean,
And
which is
so
also
that
sort of an image of hell to me. But if it like happens to contain good poems by accident, then that's, yeah, great.
yeah,
All right.
and I mean that's like one thing, but like other things, just like tabling at places, being at places where you can get your stuff out, you know,
Yeah.
places where people aren't necessarily looking for your stuff.
So what you're saying is that the market is out there. It's just being looked for in the wrong places by people who aren't even really bothering to look for it.
No, it's just that the poetry scene does not want to grow. It's been made abundantly clear that they could give a shit if they grow or not.
Yeah.
So being where you can be to fucking hawk your shit is how you do it.
You know, the way you get publishers to start being transparent about their circulation numbers?
Sexual lawsuits.
You be transparent about yours and embarrass them with them.
Okay.
Like if you can draw in good writers by saying, here's how my circulation, here's the number of, of copies in an edition, here's the number that we sold with the last edition.
Yeah.
If you can promote those kind of numbers openly, then there is at least an incentive for people who think they can compete with that to try to compete.
I see what you're saying, and that makes sense. I'm just trying to figure out scale because, like, so are you talking magazines right now? Or are you talking like big publishers or
I'm talking
small
magazine. Well,
presses?
I'm talking magazines and small presses. I mean, I'm talking
Okay.
basically like the places that most poets are looking to publish either individual poems or a collection,
Yeah.
and there is more demand for places where like the demand flows in the direction of the publishers right now, and so
Mhm.
they can be a little bit aloof, and they can be opaque about what's actually happening when they publish books. I mean, I've been pretty open on the podcast about this, like to the point where you can even not have your press exist anymore and still be
Mhm.
accepting submissions and contest fees, and like have
Does that
such a
happen?
that is exactly what happened to me. Like you have such a low circulation that it's actually zero because you're not publishing books anymore. But you still like take submission fees, and I mean like that's the
Oh,
like the scandal beyond like my own book getting fucked over
yeah.
is, you know, a few hundred people at least sent in 25-30 bucks to this place.
Now,
That money never went to anywhere.
is there argument saying that that was they were hoping to be able to get themselves back on track by getting that?
If there is an argument, nobody's making it.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, I think, but that tells you something. I mean, and it clarifies also to me some of the unearned mystique surrounding certain of these small presses, particularly among formal presses. I spoke with a, you know, relatively prominent poet who listens to the show, and I don't want to name him. Like he was very frank with his feelings about this is because this is something else. The question I have for you, like this is sort of my thought for this episode, is like I do kind of want to get into like the brass tacks of what
Hmm.
is actually happening when we publish. And like
Okay.
another enormous qualm I have publishing books of poetry with the like various small presses that publish formal poetry, or even the other presses that like sometimes maybe publish formal poetry, is that they almost all look like shit. Like they're not well done, or they're
Okay.
sloppily done, or they like don't bother to get a real design, or they're sort of married to this rigid design that it looks like fine. Like the bad like to me it's like it's the Scylla and Charybdis of, well, do you want this to look like it was deliberately designed by somebody, but it's bad? Or do you want this to look like it was designed by like Fiat 50 years ago, but at
Well, let
least it
me
looks like a real book?
are the majority of books that you see from small presses, can you tell if they're digitally printed or if they're offset printed?
Oh man, I don't even know what that means.
Okay.
But I know a lot of them look like shit.
Okay.
And I'm not even getting into the type set at this point. I'm talking about, though, Waywiser for years and years and years and years only published books with sans serif fonts, and it
Okay.
just makes the whole thing feel like you're reading an office memo in Helvetica. And
Yeah.
thankfully, I think they have now started using serifs. Thank God. But then, even beyond all that, the covers are generally pretty atrocious.
Yeah.
Like pretty like let me all right, well, I'm not gonna be able to share it on here because I don't know how that works, but like
Okay.
there's some pretty awful covers of books. And
Yeah.
so yeah, like I'm and I think there's also a difference too between, like, maybe part of what you're promoting as well is a different attitude and philosophy toward publication, because I think if you publish a book only every several years,
Hmm.
and like much of the victory, much of the triumph of that publication is the mere fact that it happened, then like you're going to have different expectations for what that physical object is going to be like than if you're publishing books kind of like a zine, or you're publishing books like for part of an ongoing lively scene where
Yeah.
people are sort of trying to follow the latest from some person. So I mean, the same way that like I think a lot differently about titles for my poems or titles for my books than I do about titles for podcast episodes. I'll do something goofy in a title for a podcast episode because who fucking cares?
Hmm.
Because it's one, like then we'll do a different one next week.
Like, do you feel
Um,
like you could ever do that about your poetry?
I think I mean I think I just, what I do when I write poetry is much slower, right? I mean, I do occasionally title poems a little bit whimsically, but I usually do it with the instinct that it actually has some teeth. Like that actually sort
Yeah.
of it. I will title poems things in a way that it seems initially maybe kind of perverse, but I think I'm not doing that by accident. I'm doing that because I think it actually could
There's a
help
reason for it.
stick a little bit,
Yeah.
And it's not actually a throwaway title. I mean, part of the reason I'm doing the podcast though is so I can do something that is kind of throwaway.
Yeah.
It's something I wonder about with your press is like, what are these books going to fucking look like, and what are they going to feel like? But then so many of the small presses making books of poetry today, in a more buttoned up fashion, look like shit anyway. So
Yeah. Well, it's
yeah.
honestly because of the rise of digital printing. Digital printing has made.
Yeah, explain what this means.
Okay. Like, when you get a book from Penguin, okay, like you pick the book up, and if you were to hold it by the spine, it would just kind of like flop over, and like you open it and the cardstock isn't too heavy, the pages feel good, and it's just like butter when you're turning it and stuff. The type looks like it's inside the paper instead of just like on top of it,
like loosely glued to the surface of the paper.
It's just like it's like floating through the paper.
So
that's like offset printing, and that's anywhere from 3 times to 5 times the cost of getting shit digitally printed. So digitally printed stuff, like what's a good example? Like I have books that were like print on demand from Amazon, and they look like books. They're rectangle and they have pages and stuff in it, but it just looks like text on a page. And then I would love to be able to offset print everything. But the cost for that is ridiculous.
Right.
So eventually that would be great to get to a point where every release you can do offset, you can choose paper, because most of the time when you do digital printing, you don't get a choice in paper. You might get like 2 choices, like 20-pound white or 60-pound cream, like
gray,
that's
or really gray.
That's all you get. No, it's usually with digital printing, it's like white, like toilet paper, or a little not white. And it looks like shit, and your cardstock options are really fucking low. But there are printers that do things, and so my idea is working in volume. I'm hoping to get the lower prices that most bigger companies get when they go in to do like some crazy like 5,000 book run. But since I'm going to be going in every month, even though I'm only getting X amount,
you're doing smaller runs, but you're doing them more frequently.
Yeah.
So maybe you can get some of the bulk options. What about design, apart from like the printing process and the paper quality? What about the design? How are you thinking about that? Well, I mean, like, sorry.
Like, is there going to be like a house design? Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, whether there's a house design or not. I mean, like, I'm just like, how are you thinking about getting the books designed so like, they're not just like designed by accident, I guess?
I usually do all of my covers, and I've done the covers for other people's books that I've done.
All right.
So, and it's usually, there's a bit of conversation obviously about it, but like I really like simplistic, minimalistic, like monotone shit.
I'm with you, but I also wonder like this is a design, this is a house design I tend to like
those Faber and Faber books.
That's it. That's exactly what I was reaching
for. Those are fucking beautiful.
That's the goal. Like that's what I want.
They're gorgeous, and the French flaps on them. And their paper is wonderful. Everything feels good. Like,
but even just the cover design, even that which FSG stole for Ben Lerner's The Hatred of Poetry. They stole that design.
Really?
Look,
I've never actually seen that book. Oh my god!
It's a fake Faber.
It's a fake.
They really made it look like it, but it's like it's like way shittier feeling, and like it's the design on the front is like, it's actually the color scheme. It's a slightly lighter green, but it's the exact color scheme of Philip Larkin's collected.
Yeah, like my John Berryman, I look at that all the time and just hold it and touch it. It's gorgeous. I absolutely love it. And like, honestly, the because that I think is like a purple and an orange. I fucking love that look. Like, I think
that's the dream. So are you aiming for something with that kind
oh
of
my god,
simplicity?
totally.
Okay, all right. They won't all have a picture of you sitting on the pot in front of on the cover.
No, just every third book does that.
Okay, all right.
Like this is the newest chapbook. It's on like glitter paper, and it's a split between me and Bunny Wild. So it's 10 of my poems and 10 of her poems.
All right. And she's one of your discoveries, or she?
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, that's that one. And then so just really simple. But the thing with this is these are so easy to make, and I have a they're inexpensive compared to doing anything else.
16 page fold over chapbook.
It's 36 pages.
I mean 36, so it's like 18 pages, like 18 sheets of paper folded over.
There you go.
Or whatever.
But I think it's 12 or 8 or 12 or 9.
This is how good I am at math.
Dude, I'm horrible at math, dude. I did a whole bit on the last episode about that, dude. I'm in charge of pens. I'm not allowed to do math anymore. But what do you call it? I don't want to say markup, but I don't know another way of saying it. The return on those is greater for me than when I put out books like this, unless I sell all of these books.
Right. And you know what I'm saying? Describe how that's bound for listeners.
Oh, this is perfect bound. This is the new paperback. It's a 4.25 by 7 pocket paperback, and most of the other books are just like folding a piece of paper in half, like the chapbooks. Right. You know what I'm saying? So
single
being
signature.
able to do like a bunch of these, like I feel more confident doing that I could take care of my writers and take care of the business continuing, as opposed to me putting like $5,000 in to get a ridiculous amount of books that are going to sit around for a long time until I could find like distributors to put things where they need to go. Because that's the other thing, because the distributors who deal with the big bookstores, like you need to have minimums, like monthly minimums that you're going to be putting out. And then you have to be able to have, I'm trying to remember the number. It was something fucking ridiculous. Like you need to have 10 titles out before most distributors will take you. And then out of those 10 titles, you need to have, I think in total, it was like there needed to be 20,000 units to have a big distributor carry your shit to be able to sell at Barnes and Nobles and Walmart and Target and all the fucking places like that. So trying to circumvent that is kind of what I'm doing at the minute.
So all right. So this is sort of, it's still kind of a hybrid vision of this blood press. What is it? What are you calling it?
What, the Poetic Anarchy Press?
Oh, is that the name of the press that you're?
That's it.
Poetic Anarchy is the name of it. Okay, all right, the press that these books out. What was the blood thing? Blood Rag, and then
the Blood Rag is the sheet, and then the Bloodshed Review is the magazine.
Bloodshed Review. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. Okay.
Too many similar sounding words.
Yeah, but your goal with all of these is these are made for people actually to buy and read, and you're not doing it for charity, and you're not doing it for university credit.
I'm doing it
not
to
doing
make
it for prestige. You're doing it to make money.
I'm doing it to make poetry popular. Like that's the deal.
All right. So you do have an extra financial mission, but it's one that's rooted in actual engagement.
Yeah, because what's the point in having a press if you can't make sure the people you're putting out are like growing? If they're not growing, you're not doing your job.
Wow. I think that is a thought that doesn't even cross the minds of most poetry publishers.
No, not at all.
Like they're not even remotely concerned with building up the reputations or the exposure of their
Yeah,
Oh,
and it's just like one of the first talks you and me ever had.
yeah,
Like we were talking about like how a record label wants to make sure the bands on their label are fucking rock stars.
right.
You know what I'm saying? They don't want to like put out a band that's not going to get popular.
Well,
Like,
this is the other thing that's crazy about poetry. Poetry, I mean, again, like it may be different with free verse, but at least among the formal poets I know, poets in their 60s publishing their fifth book
mhm,
are are submitting to book contests to do it.
yeah,
Like people don't, there's not any kind of understanding that you get into a relationship with a publisher.
yeah,
So in a sense, like they have no, it's they're very one and done about it. So
yeah.
they're not thinking about building a career. I mean, in any sense, they're not thinking about like building you up and then publishing your next book. That's not,
And
yeah,
I just don't understand the point because the publisher themselves are shooting themselves in the foot by doing that. Like,
yeah,
why put money behind somebody and put their stuff out if
yeah.
you're not like cultivating them to be able to put out a bigger book the next time they put a book out?
Right. So then the question is this, how right was Gemma Rivecchio about, like, because the obvious answer that comes to mind is, well, the reason you put your money behind a poet to publish a book of his poems and then never publish another one is that you're not really putting your money behind it, you're putting contest money behind it, and you have the contest in order to raise money.
Yeah. Like those
So
numbers
yeah.
from that, I can't remember. I sent you the link of the woman who does the like poetry prize thing, and she looks at how much money goes into the poetry prizes each year. She has like the
Oh
spreadsheet and shit.
yeah, I'll have to find that because that was worth looking. Yeah,
Like it was insane. I couldn't believe those
yeah.
numbers. I can't remember
Okay,
what they were, but I
so
remember
then
when I read it, I
yeah,
was like, fuck.
right. So
Like
then
that's the whole thing.
but then and so she was wrong about, like, she was right that like editors of little literary magazines are not pirates, but maybe she was wrong about some of the small presses not being pirates. If they're taking
Yeah,
in money,
yeah,
money of the kind you're talking about with those
yeah.
contests.
But I also think that, like, I don't know, what's a word for a pirate that doesn't know how to pillage?
It's like a
Like
lazy
a
and incompetent,
sailor,
right?
like
Like a
uh,
bad Viking.
yeah. It's just like I don't get it. Like I don't understand the why.
And
I
a lot
guess
of it, I think,
that's my big thing.
is just having a perch, having a sinecure, having like the whatever faint aura of prestige surrounds some of these dying institutions,
Yeah,
getting to say I'm the editor of X, or
yeah.
that's about it.
Well, the other thing I'm really hoping that this Poetic Anarchy Press could do is start showing the people who I'm pushing as poets. I want them to start their own little magazines and their own small presses. So
Oh,
they could start finding people that are into the shit that they're into and start pushing those people.
okay.
Because I feel like a lot of all of this is just like people not knowing or understanding or caring that they can cultivate stuff and push stuff through as well.
That almost sounds like the opposite of a pyramid scheme. Like you're like, it's like if you were encouraging people to start their own businesses under you, but then when they did that, you would make less money instead of more.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I mean, yes and no, because like at the same time, like if I got Bunny to put out her own zine where
yeah,
she was putting people out and stuff like that,
yeah,
if people were fans of hers and submitting to her to try to get their stuff out,
yeah,
like if they're fans of her, they had to read her somewhere. So where were they reading her? Oh, they were reading her on Poetic Anarchy Press.
yeah. No,
You know what I'm
but I'm
saying?
saying, like, you're not the with a pyramid scheme, you encourage somebody to start running a business below you,
Oh, and then
and
give
then
me
you get
money up. Yeah.
kickbacks, right? Like the mob.
Yeah. No, I'm not
This
talking
is the
about
opposite
that.
of
Like,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is the
Okay.
opposite of that because I want it to spread.
Right.
You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? And like I feel like the problem, like what you were talking about with like the formalist guy in his 60s who has 5 books out and is still doing the thing. Like I
Yeah.
feel like one of the problems of formalists is the idea that they cannot or should not publish rapidly. And
Yeah.
I feel like
A lot of them, I mean, I think a lot of them publish too rapid. I mean, I think a lot of them
oh,
publish
do they?
too often. I mean, it depends, but I definitely
I just keep
have
hearing
had the
that, like,
feeling about like people publishing. I mean, I also have like a almost Horatian standard for slowness.
yeah,
But like, yeah, I mean, I think people, I think there are people who publish way too often
yeah.
among formal and free verse books.
So what is the standard? Like, why is it an issue? Do you think their work just isn't good because they're putting it out too fast? Or do you think they're asking too much of you to buy their stuff that rapidly?
I mean, some of both. Like, definitely, there's some like I haven't read your last book. Give me a minute. Give me like let me catch up, motherfucker. Uh, I also think like I just think like a pretty good poem is not. There's just not really any need for that. Like I read plenty of poems that are not. It's not really fair to say they're trash or they're terrible, but they're fine. They're like this is a person who cares about language, who has some experience, who's learned to do some things with technique, who is definitely putting some effort into this. But like the result is just like, well, this was fine. Like this was a fine poem by you about a subject I guess I hadn't read you write a poem about before. That's not the value. Like that's not where lyrics have value. Part of the value of a lyric is like Randall Jarrell's the line I know I've mentioned on the show before about like you stand out in a field and you get struck by lightning maybe a handful of times in a career, and if you do, then that's like you're a significant poet. Like that's amazingly lucky if you get struck by lightning a handful of times. Most people get struck by
And then
lightning never.
my
And some
argument
people
is
once. Yeah,
my argument to that is that I am the lightning. You know what I'm saying?
right. But I mean, I mean maybe, but maybe I mean something different by lightning. Like I just think that like even the best effort and the best talent and the best skill all coming together still need some je ne sais
So
quoi in order to produce a poem that's really something special.
do you
And
feel
like
the
we just
same
don't
way
need
with
that. Yeah,
do you
sorry,
feel
go
the
ahead.
same way with music and bands and stuff? Like people, like artists you
I
follow?
don't have serious artistic thoughts about music or bands. Like I don't like just didn't I just do an episode about how I listen to the fucking National? Like I don't have strong like I don't know what I'm talking about. I just like some stuff that I like.
Yeah.
Fine. I think, I think with bands there's a chemistry thing as well. Like probably in most cases, there's you have this relatively short span when you're going to put out really, when the magic's really happening. That's
Mhm.
probably not doesn't last all that long. But yeah, I just think like poems are sort of uh there's so many other ways to get so much of what we get there that if you're going to get it
Mhm.
from poetry, you only need so much of it. And when it's really good, it can be extraordinary. And I don't
Yeah.
think that every book should only contain 100% great poems, but I think there are a lot of books where like the person publishing them doesn't even think all of the poems in them are pretty good. Like there's so many books that get put out, magazines that get put out where like the actual authors of the poems would say of them like, no, this was good enough to publish. Like, no, you should never publish a book thing that you think is good enough. No, you should think it at least has a chance of being someone's favorite poem. You should think that it's like this is going to draw
Totally.
blood. So yeah, I mean, I think people should mostly publish less often. Like the number of poets I wish would publish more often is a very small number.
Do you have any like belief in supply and demand?
Yes, but I don't think with poetry it works the same way.
Why?
Partly because uh, poems aren't perishable in the same way. But like even with music, like you're not.
They are perishable because you just said, like, why are you putting out another book? I haven't even read your last one. So
Well,
to
no, no,
you,
no. But
that
that's not
last
perishable.
book,
No, no. Well, but I'm saying the last book is not perishable. Like you're not
then
just.
why does it matter if someone's going to put out another book and you haven't read the last one yet?
Well, it only matters if I'm planning to read them. and then there's just more for me to read, and I already have a lot to read, and I'm expecting,
So does that give you like a fear of missing out thing, like the FOMO deal?
no, I think the like if you are putting out that many books that I'm having to slow down to catch up, then there's probably what that says is like, if I'm honest, like part of like a significant reason that I'm reading your work is because I have is for like is not for pure pleasure, right? Like because I know you, or I
I
have
don't know,
there's some
because
other
in
reason.
my
Like
head, it sounds like by me putting out another book, it's reminding you, oh, you have that other book and you haven't read it yet. So go read it so you could get the next book now.
maybe, all right, like so, like I like Jonathan Franzen again. Like I'm so basic and boring. Like I like Jonathan Franzen's novels. He has a novel that came out a few years ago. I have a copy of it. I haven't read it. I've heard it's great. I'm looking forward to reading it. If like he tends to publish a book every 10 years, if he happened to publish another book this year, like his next novel this year, then I would just say like, oh, cool. Like I have another one saved up. But like
You
there
wouldn't
are a
push
lot.
the other one up the totem pole to read it.
It might that might spur me to get started on the first one, but I wouldn't be like, oh no, another 500 pages. Whereas I think there are a lot of like because I make a point of reading, like if I can't say I read the books of every single poet I know because I know so many poets, but like
Mhm.
if I am like in a friendly acquaintancey circle with you, I will buy and read your books.
Yeah.
And so like in that context, like slow down, because like like those are not all. There's a like there's a mixture of. I'm trying to think of like, are there poets that I really really like as people and really really hate their work, and I don't think that probably is the case. But like it's the feeling I have with like with posting stuff on social media, or like share, like sharing certain kinds of like gratitude stuff on the podcast, is like this is stuff I would skip. Like
Yeah.
if I am being my laziest, most self-serving, most like pleasure-seeking self, skip, 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 skip. And
Because you
so,
are
yeah,
not a fan. You are an artist. You're not a fan. Like every
fan. I mean,
argument you've brought up is about somebody who isn't like frothing at the mouth for the next thing that you're going to do.
who is? Who's not?
Fans.
I mean, I was gonna say who's not my mom, but like even my mom isn't that excited to
It's
read
not
my
my
stuff.
mom.
Like I don't
Oh
know. I don't
shit.
like. I just don't think. Maybe I'm just skeptical about that. But I do want to hear from listeners about like how what actually makes sense. Like what is an actually good faith way to do this, and like what is, if say like a thing I've been thinking about is like doing a thing in the show notes, or doing like a Substack, because you can sign up for Substack for free and not pay the subscription, and then like I could still then send out like written things. Like I could send out pages of links, or I could even send
Well,
out
could you
some
even
original
do
stuff.
something?
Like
Could you do something where, like, if, like, let's say the secret show is $5, if you did $7,
yeah,
you get the secret show and a poem of mine every month.
I don't think people are going to pay $2 for a poem every month. It seems a
Well, I
little
don't. I'm
excessive.
asking you, like, what, like,
Like,
what do you feel like your poetry is worth?
and money?
Yeah.
I have no idea. It doesn't.
What?
It's a meaningless question.
It's
Meaningless
not.
question. I mean,
No. See,
I don't.
this is the
I have no sense of.
problem.
Yeah, I have no sense of how to value it. But I also have no expectation that my expectations that the Venn diagram of people listening to the show and people who actively want to read my poems is like overlapping, but not a circle. Like
Well, it doesn't
you
need to be
know,
a circle.
it's like a slender cat's eye. You know.
Yeah, and that's fine, but you need to
Yeah.
catch the stuff that's in the cat's eye. You
All
know what
right.
I'm saying?
All right, Cat's Eye listeners. Tell me what would make, also because there are, like there's a good number of like good poets who listen to the show, and
Yeah.
even like who subscribe to the show. And so when they
How do
have
they do
work,
it?
like when they, well, they're not doing this. They publish in magazines, and like some
Mhm.
of them have good book deals and whatever. But like when they have work coming out in magazines, is there a worthwhile way? Like it seems to me that like a thing I actually would be interested in as a reader is like, or like there's some links to like recent poems published by good people that like I
Mhm.
just have not was not aware of. Like that is a thing I could aggregate. I also like, to me, the danger is like like a small number of people who flood it with a gajillion things they publish every month.
So here's how you
Yeah.
would do this. If you put one thing in the show notes that say, and if you want to see the shit I'm into this week, click here. And it takes you to a page to your website that you can update the page, not like a post, but a page.
Okay.
And just update the page every time. And then that page could be a sea of links. And that way you're not screwing everyone up on the podcast looking at the show notes that go on forever because of all the links in it.
Right. Okay.
And so if they want to, they could go there and look at that stuff. And it doesn't have to be stuff you're asking for people to send you. It's like shit like that you're actually interested in.
I mean, a lot of that is just the show already, right?
Well, no, like
a lot of the show is already like stuff that I'm reading and interested in at the moment. Like,
okay, so what would you want to promote? Like, I'm
what I'm trying to respond to is your sort of challenge to the people you have published in the past. You know, you say like, oh, why aren't you promoting this, or why are you not spreading the word on this? And so I'm basically trying to think of like, what is a good faith way to do that I think actually has a chance of being read and is not just an empty gesture. So just then what I guess like exists. So here's what I actually want to hear from listeners is not, would you be interested in sending me links to your recent publications? Because probably you would if you think I'm going to repost them somewhere. But but what would you actually want to read or find or be sent that would, like, as a reader, what would be good or helpful for you that I might be able to help distribute through the podcast or through the Substack? Like, would you be interested in a list of like what places, like where are some recent publications by various friends of the show, or getting original stuff, or getting like aggregation of stuff? I mean, again, like the stuff I'm into is largely stuff that I talk about on the podcast. Like, are there kinds of ways you would be interested in receiving and reading poetry or promotional information that wouldn't just be wasted digital ink? Because they don't want to just do like the what's the name of the section on Radisphere? It's like the
promotions thing.
It's like the distinguished members or something like that, and it's just like this graveyard of just like dead links nobody's ever clicked on.
Does Cameron go through there?
I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe, in fact, maybe lots of people go through there, and I'm just an asshole who never clicks on it. But I'm kind of like, again, like I assume what's the Whitman line? Like, what I assume you shall assume, and you're like I assume that when I am petty and lazy, other people maybe are as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to build another distinguished guest or whatever not guest, member. There's some other adjective that Alex Pepple has on there, but I don't want one of those.
Nice.
But yeah, what would actually be of interest or value to listeners and readers? Yeah, something has to, like, your episode, like I definitely didn't agree with all of it, but it made me think like I'm tired of like the bullshit game. I'm tired of doing all this in a phony way. I would love for there to be a slightly more honest, straight ahead way to handle.
And honestly, the social media thing was that's the most, like, I don't want to say tangible, but the most visual way that you could see how people do stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So like,
if you're not even bothering to post it on social media, then you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Was this week's show. You can reach me, as always, at SLEERICKETS@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening, and with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.